Have you ever mistaken love for safety, only to realize it was just a cage you couldn't see? That thought didn't come to me until much later. But if I had paused, even for a second, to listen to the whisper beneath the excitement that morning, I might have heard it trying to warn me. It was my 64th birthday, and I woke up smiling. Not because I had grand plans, but because I had hope. That soft, foolish hope that creeps in when you've been lonely too long. I put on my favorite navy sweater, the one with tiny pearl buttons that my late husband, Thomas, had once called elegant. I curled my hair, just a little, and dusted on some blush to make my tired skin feel alive again. The air smelled like cinnamon because I made pancakes, the same kind I'd made every birthday when Ryan was a boy. He always loved them. Blueberry, with a hint of nutmeg and a warm pat of butter. I even set 2 plates. One for him. One for me. That little act made my heart flutter like a girl setting a table for her first date. By noon, the pancakes had gone cold. I'd refreshed the coffee twice. I kept checking the driveway through the lace curtains, pretending not to. The silence was so loud I could hear the old wall clock ticking like a metronome marking the slow passage of disappointment. I told myself it was fine. Maybe he got held up. Maybe work called. Maybe his wife, Lauren, was having another one of her migraines. But in my heart, I knew. Ryan hadn't called me much in the last year. His texts had grown shorter. His voice on the phone more clipped. There were excuses, always good ones, but they stacked like bricks in a wall I didn't know we were building between us. Then, at 2:18 p.m., the doorbell rang. I nearly dropped my mug. My hands were shaking as I opened the door, and there he was, my only son, standing on the porch with a bouquet of slightly wilted carnations from the grocery store. He smiled. That familiar, boyish grin he used to wear whenever he'd crashed the car or needed money. "Happy birthday, Mom." I smiled back, but there was a pinch in my chest I couldn't quite explain. "You came," I whispered, stepping forward to hug him. His embrace was brief, stiff, like a hug you give a coworker at a retirement party. "Of course," he said, brushing it off. "Now come on, get your coat. We've got lunch reservations." I didn't even ask where. I just grabbed my purse, slipped on those pinchy black shoes I kept for special occasions, and followed him to the car. There was this small thrill inside me, childish and hopeful. Maybe he did remember. Maybe there would be cake. Or candles. Or even just a quiet table at that little Italian place we used to love before things got distant. We drove in silence, and I kept glancing over, looking for signs of the boy I raised. The one who once made me a card out of construction paper and said I was his forever hero. But we didn't turn toward downtown. We didn't head to any restaurant I recognized. Instead, we pulled into a long driveway lined with golden maples, their leaves shivering in the wind like they knew something I didn't. At the end of that drive stood a modest brick building with white trim and a sign that read, "Golden Maples Senior Living Facility." I blinked. "Ryan?" I asked, my voice already cracking. He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk." The world tilted. Everything in me wanted to unhear those words. "What is this?" I asked, clutching my purse like it was the last familiar thing in the world. It's not safe for you to live alone anymore," he said quickly, as if rehearsed. "Your memory, the falls, the mix-ups with meds, this place is really good. It's safe. There's staff. You'll have your own room, activities, people your age." "What memory lapses?" I snapped. He didn't answer. Just turned off the engine, unbuckled, and got out. I didn't move. Then, like a slow punch to the gut, I watched him pop the trunk and lift out a suitcase. My suitcase. Already packed. I couldn't even find the words. I just stared. You went through my things? He exhaled, annoyed. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I sat frozen as he approached with the bag, dragging it like he was checking in for a weekend getaway. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and steamed vegetables. Reception smiled. The walls were beige. Music played somewhere faintly in the background, a melody so cheerful it felt cruel. He handed over papers. Legal documents. A notarized transfer of power of attorney. My name. His signature. It was done. I didn't cry. Not then. That would come later. In that moment, I was too shocked to feel anything but hollow. A nurse guided me to a room the size of a motel suite. Adjustable bed. A tiny window facing a brick wall. My birthday gift. The nurse left me alone. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, clutching the grocery store flowers now wilting in their cheap plastic wrap. The silence pressed in like fog, heavy and clinging. That night, I lay awake and listened to the world I'd known evaporate. No laughter. No candle. No sun. Only a hard mattress, the smell of bleach, and the ache of knowing that the person I'd loved most had looked at me, and seen a burden. But this wasn't the end. It was just the first crack. And sometimes, cracks let the light in.
We'd love to know where you're watching from. It means so much to have you here. If you're new, please give us a like and subscribe to be part of this warm and growing community.
You know, people often think abandonment happens in a single, dramatic moment. A slamming door. A shouted goodbye. But sometimes, it unfolds in the silence after. That night, I barely moved. I lay on the mattress like a forgotten coat, stiff and cold, staring at the textured ceiling while muffled television sounds drifted down the hallway. The flowers Ryan had brought, already limp from the car ride, had begun to brown at the edges. I placed them in a water cup, as if kindness could coax them back. The next morning, I asked the nurse, an older woman named Grace, for my cell phone. "Oh, sweetie," she said gently, "your son disabled the line. Said it was confusing you." Confusing me? I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. More like something cracking open inside. That's when I understood. I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be forgotten. A slow erasure, dressed in soft voices and padded walls. They had even removed the calendar from the wall. No reminders of time passing. No names. No clocks loud enough to anchor you. I stopped eating, not out of protest, but because everything tasted like nothing. The food. The air. Even the pitying smiles. People meant well. I could see that. But their kindness felt like a lid on a coffin. They spoke to me like I was fading. Like I couldn't possibly still be a woman who once ran a household, led PTA meetings, and debated city council members about property taxes. No one asked what I used to do. No one asked what I loved. I became a room number. A file. A medication schedule on a chart. Every sweetheart and dear felt like sandpaper on my skin. My roommate, Nancy, slept most of the day and snored like a freight train at night. She talked only occasionally, mumbling names of people who hadn't visited in years. I listened to her stories. I recognized the ache in her voice, the same kind that had taken up residence in my own chest. But I refused to disappear. I began doing the crosswords left in the hallway. I watched the morning news, even if it was just to feel the rhythm of the world outside these beige walls. I reread To Kill a Mockingbird twice, once for the words, once for the courage it made me feel. On the fourth day, everything changed. She wasn't supposed to be there. A nurse had called in sick, and a replacement had been pulled from another wing. Her name tag read Jasmine. She was young, maybe late 20s, with thick braids pinned up under a green scrub cap and a spark in her eyes that said she saw more than most. She was checking my vitals, humming something by Stevie Wonder under her breath, when she paused. "You don't belong here," she said softly. I blinked. "Excuse me?" Jasmine smiled. "Don't get me wrong. A lot of folks here need care, and that's okay. But your eyes still know things. You're not lost." Her words hit like a gentle earthquake. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding back tears until one slipped free. We got to talking. I told her about Ryan, carefully, in pieces, like placing fragile china back on a shelf. About how I raised him alone after Thomas passed. About the birthday he used to plan when he was 12, with hand-drawn cards and macaroni necklaces. How I never missed a school play, even when I had to work late shifts at the bakery to afford his tuition. Jasmine listened. Not the kind of nod and smile listening, but real listening. The kind that makes you feel human again. Later that day, she returned, glancing over her shoulder before slipping into the room. She held out a folded slip of paper. "We found this tucked inside a Bible left behind by a resident who passed last week. His name was Mr. Henley. Sweet old guy. No family. No one claimed his things. It was a lottery ticket. Yellowed. Bent at the corner. Dated 2 weeks earlier." I stared at it and let out a brittle laugh. "You want me to try my luck?" She winked. "The world owes you something. Maybe this is it." That night, boredom and something more, something dangerous and delicious, got the better of me. When the hall went quiet and the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights was the only sound, I slipped into the tiny lounge. The computer was ancient. It wheezed and groaned like a tired mule. But it worked. I typed in the numbers. Paused. Typed them again. Then again. I sat back, covering my mouth with both hands. 12 million. 12 million dollars. The air around me thinned. I looked around. No one was there. No cameras. No one watching. And for the first time in my life, the first real time, I felt something new. Power. Not joy. Not yet. Just this raw, electric surge of possibility. If Ryan found out, I knew he'd try to take it. So I printed the confirmation. Folded it small. Tucked it inside my bra like a secret talisman. The next day, I pulled Jasmine aside. "I need to speak to someone. A lawyer. Someone discreet." She didn't ask why. She just nodded. Because Jasmine knew what I knew now. I wasn't here to be erased. I was here to escape. And I wasn't just going to walk out. I was going to vanish. Freedom doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes, it comes on the breath of a whisper, in the flicker of a decision you never thought you'd be strong enough to make. Jasmine worked fast. Faster than I expected. That same week, she introduced me to a volunteer attorney who visited the facility twice a month to help residents update wills or manage their estate paperwork. His name was Michael Grant. Mid-30s. Thoughtful. Wore wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet confidence that made me trust him right away. We met in the tiny break room, sandwiched between a soda machine and a microwave that smelled faintly of burned popcorn. I passed him the printed lottery confirmation with hands that still trembled from the weight of it. Michael took one look, raised his eyebrows, and said just 4 words. "Do you want out?" I nodded. No hesitation. No second-guessing. "Then we'll need to move fast," he said, already flipping open a sleek black notebook. The next few hours moved like a dream stitched together with urgency. Paperwork. Notarizations. Legal filings. A new phone under a fake name. A blind trust. Michael contacted an independent financial advisor he'd worked with before, a woman named Karen Cho who specialized in securing sudden windfalls without a trace. They set everything up: a burner email, a temporary mailing address in North Dakota, a holding account hidden behind layers of shell entities. The money was no longer in my name. Ryan would never see a cent. When I signed the new will, one that left everything to a network of charities supporting abandoned seniors, I felt something lift off my chest. Like I was breathing oxygen for the first time in months. That night, Jasmine brought me an old duffel bag she said used to belong to her aunt. No labels. No questions, she smiled. Inside were warm clothes, a second-hand pair of sneakers, and a flannel jacket that smelled faintly of lilac detergent. We hugged before I left. "Don't forget us when you're free," she whispered. "I won't," I promised. "You helped me remember who I am." At 5:17 a.m., just before the morning rounds, I slipped through the side entrance of Golden Maple Senior Living. No one stopped me. No alarms. No suspicion. Just a quiet woman with a duffel bag walking out of a place where people go to disappear. Only I wasn't vanishing. I was starting over. The bus ride out of Oregon was long, slow, and mercifully quiet. I sat in the back, hood pulled low, sunglasses shielding my eyes. Outside the window, pines turned into farmlands. Farmlands gave way to snow-dusted fields. And somewhere after we crossed into Montana, I exhaled for the first time in days. Michael had arranged for a modest house under the blind trust, tucked away in the foothills outside Missoula. Off-grid. No cameras. No nosy neighbors. Just distance and silence. When I arrived, the house looked like something from a forgotten postcard. Single-story brick, paint chipped and fading. The porch steps creaked. The mailbox leaned like it was tired of standing straight. But it was mine, or rather, it was mine in a way no one could touch. I stepped inside. The floors were clean. The heater worked. The water ran hot. And best of all, it was silent. Not the kind of silence that hummed through sterile hallways. This was peaceful silence. The kind that wraps around you like an old quilt. I spent the first evening sitting on the porch wrapped in Jasmine's flannel jacket, watching dead leaves dance across the yard like tiny ghosts finding their way home. I didn't know what day it was. I didn't care. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't Helen, the mother. Helen, the widow. Helen, the patient. I was just Helen. In the following days, I kept a low profile. I cooked simple meals: rice, soups, fried eggs on toast. I walked to the mailbox in the morning. I spent afternoons with a notebook in my lap, jotting down fragments of memory, trying to remember who I was before life became a string of sacrifices. I also checked the news religiously. Part of me expected headlines like, "Missing woman claims mega millions jackpot," but there was nothing. Then, one morning, tucked between a grocery flyer and a coupon booklet, came the letter that made my heart stop. No return address. Expensive paper. Heavy. Inside was a photocopy of a loan document. My signature. Thomas's. And Ryan's. The date? 12 years ago. I'd never seen it before. The handwriting looked like mine, my signature, right down to the looped G in Helen. But the signature was too clean. Too practiced. My hands shook as I pulled the fireproof box out from under the floorboards, the one Michael had given me. I flipped through old statements, insurance paperwork, tax returns we'd salvaged before I left. And there, nestled deep inside, were 3 more documents. All signed by me. All fakes. Ryan hadn't just dropped me off at that facility. He'd been robbing me for years. It explained everything, the tension in our final years. Why Thomas had suddenly started keeping our finances to himself. The canceled vacations. The emergencies Ryan always seemed to have. The shiny new cars he could never explain. Thomas must have known. But he never said a word. He carried that shame to the grave. And now I was holding the truth in my hands like a loaded weapon. The next morning, I called Michael. I have new information, I said quietly. About what? He asked. Forged documents. Stolen money. My son did it. He didn't hesitate. Do you want to press charges? Not yet, I replied. Not until I'm ready. Because I didn't just want justice. I wanted Ryan to feel the fear I had felt. To live in the silence of not knowing. To wonder every minute if I knew. Because now? I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. When you spend your life giving everything to someone, your time, your money, your very sense of self, you never imagine that one day, you might have to defend yourself from them. But that's exactly where I found myself. It started with a letter. A real one this time. Certified. Signed for. Stamped with the cold authority of the County Courthouse of Eugene, Oregon. Inside were papers filed by my son. Ryan Carter had petitioned the court to have me declared mentally incapacitated. I stared at the letter so long I forgot to breathe. The weight of it felt heavier than the fireproof box beneath the floorboards. He wasn't done with me. He hadn't even started. The filing included statements from 2 people, one, a neighbor who hadn't spoken to me in years. The other, a friend from Ryan's college days whom I barely remembered. Both swore I had shown signs of confusion, paranoia, and irrational behavior over the past year. They even included audio clips, recordings of voicemails I had left during moments of sadness or frustration. Voicemails I had thought were safe. Private. They were cut, spliced, edited to sound unhinged. But the most chilling part? A psychiatrist's letter, from someone I had never met, suggesting I posed a danger to myself and others if not under supervision. They were painting me as a fragile woman on the edge. When, in truth, I had never been clearer. That night, I called Michael. He came immediately, bringing a thermos of coffee and a quiet steadiness I didn't know I needed until it filled the room. He read through the documents, then looked up at me. They're trying to seize your trust, he said. If this goes through, they'll lock you out of your finances, your autonomy, everything. I nodded. What do you want to do? I looked him square in the eye. We fight. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Michael brought in another attorney, a litigation specialist named Maria Estrada. She had sharp eyes, wore tailored blazers with sneakers, and called me Ms. Helen, in a way that felt both respectful and empowering. We gathered everything. phone logs, financial records. A journal I had started keeping after my escape. I documented every call, every decision, every proof of independence. Most importantly, we scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Priya Patel, a kind and fiercely intelligent woman, came to my home. We talked for 3 hours, about my childhood, my late husband, Ryan, my fears, my hopes. She didn't treat me like a case study. She treated me like a person. Before she left, she touched my hand and said softly, "Helen, you're one of the clearest, strongest minds I've seen this year." And for the first time since the letter arrived, I exhaled. But Ryan was busy building his stage. In the media, he played the grieving son. He gave interviews, posted online, begged for information about his missing mother. He cried on cue and spoke about love. He used a photo from 5 years ago, me in a yellow sweater, cake on my cheek, him laughing beside me. It was a performance, and he was a star. But stars fall. And I was ready with the telescope. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. Not to impress, but to be seen, truly seen. A charcoal gray coat. My husband's old watch. Modest earrings. Low heels that clicked across the polished floor with purpose. I carried a folder. Not too thick. Just heavy enough to say, I came prepared. The courthouse was cold. Sterile. Inside, Ryan sat at the front of the courtroom, flanked by his lawyer. When he saw me, he stood. Smiled. A soft, careful, calculated smile. I didn't return it. Because I saw it for what it was, a mask. One he'd worn his entire life. The judge, a man in his 70s with heavy brows and a voice like slow thunder, began the proceedings. In the matter of Helen Carter's mental competency. The words hung in the air like a noose. Ryan's attorney went first. He was smooth. Polished. Used words like concern and deterioration. Said I had gone missing. Said I was being manipulated by unknown parties. Played the audio clips. I listened to myself cry in those recordings. But I wasn't ashamed. I had cried for love. For betrayal. For truth. And now, I was done crying. Then Ryan took the stand. "I love my mom," he began, voice trembling at all the right beats. "This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But she's not herself anymore." I felt my teeth clench. That's when the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to speak?" I rose slowly. Walked to the front. Let the silence settle. "My name is Helen Carter. I am 64 years old. I am not mentally incapacitated. I am not confused. And I am not anyone's victim." I handed the judge a copy of Dr. Patel's evaluation. Signed. Stamped. Clear. Mentally sound. Emotionally stable. Fully independent. The courtroom was still. Then I opened my folder again. "I have here," I said, "a full log of my daily activities for the past 4 weeks. A record of my bank transfers. Receipts. Medical reports. Signed testimony from the attorney who helped me leave Golden Maple." I paused. "And I have something else. But I'm not presenting that today." I saw Ryan shift in his seat. What I didn't show was the file, my ace, the one with every fake loan, every forged signature, every crime that bore his fingerprints. I didn't need to play that card. Not yet. Instead, I looked directly at the judge. My son put me in a facility against my will. He took my phone. He took my freedom. And now he wants to take what little I have left, my voice. My dignity. Please, don't let him. The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. We will reconvene in 2 weeks, he said. All evidence will be reviewed. As the gavel fell, I looked at Ryan one last time. He didn't smile. His jaw was tight. His eyes wide. He knew. The tide had turned. And I was no longer afraid. There's a certain silence that comes after you've told the truth in a room full of people waiting to doubt you. It's not peace. It's potential. And in the days following that hearing, I lived in that silence, feeding it, shaping it, letting it sharpen me. Ryan wasted no time. The very same afternoon, he stood in front of a local news station, tears in his eyes, telling the world that he feared his mother was being influenced by unknown parties, and that he just wanted to bring her home safely. He looked directly into the camera like he was speaking to me through it. He still loves you, a woman commented under the video. He's just scared. Scared? No. He was cornered. And scared men make dangerous moves. Meanwhile, I was building something quieter, but far stronger. I had Michael send the file. Not to the court. To the Department of Justice. Anonymously. Everything we had, every forged loan, every false tax return, every fake signature, was bundled and sealed like a message in a bottle launched into the legal sea. No names attached. No accusations made. Just facts. Let them follow the breadcrumbs. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was planting a trap. But I wasn't done yet. That night, I sat in my living room, the fire burning low, the wind brushing softly against the windows, and I made a decision. It was time to speak. I created a burner account online under one of the aliases Michael had arranged for me and made a sizable donation, $5 million to a national nonprofit that helps protect the elderly from financial abuse. No fanfare. No press release. Just a number. But numbers speak. Within days, the organization launched a new campaign, featuring an unnamed case of a woman placed in a nursing home by her own son, who later tried to seize her assets. The story was eerily familiar, and people noticed. They connected the dots. Social media lit up. This feels off. Why hasn't anyone asked her side? He's too perfect. Something's not right. Ryan's mask, so carefully sculpted, began to slip in the court of public opinion. And then, unexpectedly, a journalist called. Her name was Emily Johnson. Sharp, soft-spoken, with a voice that carried both curiosity and caution. She didn't ask for a headline. She asked for the truth. We met in a quiet coffee shop 2 towns over. I wore sunglasses and a scarf. She ordered chamomile tea. I drank black coffee and let the silence sit for a while before I spoke. I was silenced, I said finally. And now, I won't be. I told her everything. Not just the facts, the emotions. The fear. The betrayal. The shame. The years I ignored the signs because I loved my son too deeply to see him as capable of harm. I didn't cry. Neither did she. But when the story came out 2 days later, titled Mother or Millionaire? The Silencing of Helen C. It exploded. It didn't name me directly. But it didn't have to. The truth had a pulse now. And then, 2 days before the court reconvened, Michael called me at midnight. They're opening a case, he said. DOJ is officially investigating Ryan. It's moving fast. I said nothing. Just sat in the dark, my hands folded over the soft fabric of the blanket in my lap, watching the shadow of the trees sway outside the window. I had waited for this moment. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of something bigger. The second hearing was held on a Tuesday. The air outside was crisp, the kind that stung your cheeks just enough to remind you you were alive. Inside, the courtroom had shifted. The energy. The looks. Even Ryan's posture. His shoulders slumped ever so slightly. His lawyer no longer smiled. Maria went first. She presented everything we'd gathered: financial records, witness statements, the full psychiatric report from Dr. Patel, and, most powerfully, a timeline. It showed that just days after Ryan filed to take over my accounts, large sums of money were withdrawn from his failing business. Coincidence? The judge didn't seem to think so. Then Dr. Patel took the stand again. She is not only mentally sound, she said, she is deliberate. Intelligent. Coherent. There is no medical basis for any declaration of incompetence. I watched Ryan's hand grip the table tighter with each word. Then it was his turn. He stood and tried to pivot. My mother isn't herself. She's confused. She's being manipulated. I stood before he could finish. Enough, I said softly, but firmly. Everyone turned. I walked to the center of the room. No notes. No folder. Just truth. I am the woman who fed you when I had no food of my own. Who walked 5 miles to bring you medicine. Who missed every vacation to put you through school. I am her. And you left me in a place to rot. I turned to the judge. Now, I ask you to let me prove that I am not nothing. The courtroom was still. Then the judge, slowly, with the weight of someone who knew what his decision would mean, spoke. Mrs. Carter, based on the overwhelming evidence presented, your psychiatric evaluation, and the inconsistencies in the petitioner's claims, this court dismisses the case. Your accounts and autonomy are fully restored. I felt my knees wobble. Not from weakness. From relief. I didn't cry. But I felt something stronger rise in my chest: pride. Ryan didn't look at me as I passed. His mask was gone. Only fear remained. But I wasn't interested in his fear anymore. Because while he had spent weeks trying to bury me, I had been building a legacy. And I wasn't done yet. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles in after a storm. Not relief. Not joy. Just a stillness. That's what those next few weeks felt like, an eerie, beautiful stillness. Michael stopped by the following morning with a manila envelope and a newspaper folded under one arm. They've filed the charges, he said simply. Ryan Carter. Under federal indictment for identity theft, tax fraud, wire fraud, and forgery. No cameras. No cuffs. Just a quiet filing and a name on the docket. It didn't make headlines. But it changed everything. The media caught on quickly. Articles began surfacing. Blog posts. Comment threads lit up. Son who claimed missing mother now under federal investigation. No one used my name. But the world didn't need it. They remembered. The missing mother. The courtroom. The anonymous donation. The woman who vanished and reappeared to reclaim her story. And now, the perfect son. Falling apart. His business partners pulled out. His accounts were frozen. His wife issued a public statement through her lawyer, quietly announcing their separation. Filing for divorce. He was alone. For a long time, I thought that would feel satisfying. But when I read the headlines, sitting at my kitchen table in Missoula, tea cooling beside me, I didn't feel triumph. I felt empty. Because surviving betrayal doesn't make you whole again. It just proves you can walk away in pieces. I spent my mornings walking to the edge of the woods behind my house. I'd stand there and just listen. To birds. To wind. To silence. I cooked myself real breakfasts again, eggs and toast, sometimes pancakes, when I wanted to remember sweeter things. I read novels that had nothing to do with survival. I played old jazz records and hummed along. I wrote letters to myself. Sometimes I'd stare at my reflection and try to see the woman who had once looked into her son's eyes and believed she was safe there. I didn't find her. But I found someone stronger. One chilly Saturday, I walked into town. It was the first time I'd been out since the interview aired. People recognized me. They didn't whisper or stare. They smiled. A woman in her 40s touched my arm at the checkout counter. "You gave my mother the courage to leave a bad situation," she whispered. At the pharmacy, a young man slipped a note into my prescription bag. "My grandma says thank you." I didn't seek that attention. But it arrived gently, like sunlight after a hard winter. Later that day, Michael came by. "They're offering him a deal," he said. 10 years, if he pleads guilty. Otherwise, it goes to trial. "And him?" I asked. "He still thinks he can talk his way out." I shook my head. "He's been pretending his whole life." That night, as I folded laundry in the living room, I heard a rustle at the front door. A soft slip. I opened it to find a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo. It was from my 62nd birthday, back when I still believed in family the way you believe in fairy tales. I was wearing a yellow sweater. Laughing. Cake on my cheek. Ryan beside me, holding the knife. Laughing too. On the back, in his handwriting. "You always believed in me. I'm sorry that wasn't enough." I stared at the photo for hours. Not crying. Not raging. Just remembering. The bedtime stories. The scraped knees. The boy who used to hug me tightly before school and ask if I'd be there when he got back. They were all pieces of him. Pieces I had loved. But love without truth isn't love at all. So I walked to the fireplace, placed the photo on the flames, and watched it curl, blacken, and fade. Not out of hate. Out of release. And then, almost full circle, I returned. To Golden Maples Senior Living. I stood in the parking lot for a long while, staring at the building where my world cracked open. Then the doors swung open, and Jasmine stepped out. Her eyes widened. She gasped. "Oh my God. Helen?" I smiled. "It's me." We embraced, not a polite hug, but one full of warmth, of shared survival. Inside, the halls had changed. The paint was brighter. The floors shinier. The common room had a new TV. A coffee station. Real books. "You did this," Jasmine whispered. "The donation. The foundation. You changed everything." "No," I said. "I just stopped letting people decide who I was." We walked the halls. I visited Nancy's old room, now a quiet reading lounge with sunlight spilling through the windows. And then I stood in front of a small gathering of residents and staff in the new activity center. They offered me a podium. I didn't take it. "I'm not here because I was wronged," I said. "I'm here because I was silenced. And I know how many of you still feel that way." Their eyes watched me, wide and full of reflection. "You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. And you are not finished." Applause broke out, quiet at first, then stronger. I stood there, letting it wash over me like a tide of something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Wholeness. Back home, I finalized the trust. The Carter Project, formerly the Margaret Project, would become a national initiative offering legal advocacy, emergency housing, and real-time support for seniors facing abuse, isolation, or exploitation. Not just another charity. A lifeline. Ryan took the plea deal. 10 years. He sent another letter. I returned it, unopened. That chapter was over. And so, in the first snow of January, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I wrote a letter to myself. Just 1 page. I read it aloud by the fire. "Dear Helen. You weren't crazy. You weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were just a woman who loved too deeply. And when they tried to write you out of your own life, you picked up the pen. And you wrote the ending yourself. I am so proud of you. With love. Yourself." I folded the letter. Placed it in a small cedar box. Set it on the mantel. Because I didn't need money, or power, or even revenge. I had something better now. Freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free. Spring came slowly to Montana. The snow melted like memories, soft at first, then suddenly, leaving behind patches of green fighting to grow. I sat on the porch one morning, sipping tea, watching the first crocuses push through the thawing soil. They reminded me of something Jasmine once said, "Even in the dark, life finds a way to bloom." The Carter Project had grown faster than I imagined. What started as a lifeline for a few had become a beacon for many. Letters poured in from across the country, from daughters trying to rescue their mothers, from sons filled with guilt and longing, and from elderly people who, for the first time, felt heard. But I didn't want to be just a symbol. I wanted to be useful. So I taught. I gave workshops on financial safety for seniors at the local library. I spoke at nursing conferences, sometimes under my real name, sometimes not. I partnered with advocates, lawyers, and volunteers who saw what I saw, that silence is the most dangerous kind of theft. I wasn't hiding anymore. One afternoon, Jasmine called. "Nancy passed away last week," she said gently. Peacefully. In her sleep. I felt a tug in my chest, not just grief, but gratitude. Nancy had been my first mirror in that place. The one who showed me what it meant to be forgotten. I lit a candle for her that night, and for all the others still waiting to be remembered. That summer, I planted a garden. Not for food. For beauty. Sunflowers, marigolds, lavender. I dug with bare hands and let the dirt remind me of the world's rawness, its pain and its promise. One morning, a young woman knocked on my door. She held a notebook, nerves in her smile. "My grandmother told me about you," she said. "She said you taught her not to be afraid anymore." I welcomed her inside. We sat at the kitchen table. She asked questions. I told her stories. Because stories are seeds, too. And if planted with care, they don't just survive. They grow.